Ian, I've never been a dictatorial, yelling type of coach. I've always sort of been in the trenches with the person, or maybe a softer kind of coach. In fact, I think this is counted against me. There's been many interviews where people, how are you going to punish and how are you going to discipline the athletes? And I'm thinking, well, if I need to punish and discipline them, I probably haven't set up my environment correctly.
Yeah.
But the interviewer at the rugby league club wants to hear that you carry a big stick or whatever the case is.
If you are looking to improve your physical health, you're going to love this episode with today's guest, Grant Jenkins. Grant has worked in athletic development and high performance sport at the top level in Australia. He's also a gym owner. He has a supplement business. What I love from this conversation, he talks about some of those old school remedies which he's bringing back, which I, from my own research, know that it works. And one particular supplement, quite well known, he talked about the wide-reaching positive benefits of that particular supplement. So that's worth listening to the end too as well. I'm Ian Hawkins, and this is Sport is Life. The purpose of sport, as I see it, is to see your vision become a reality. Find your voice, create strong connections, and learn to trust your body. G'day, Grant. How are you?
Yeah, good. How are you going?
Very well, thank you. We're going to dive into a whole lot of different areas around sport, the work that you've done in that sport space, particularly at a professional level. But I'm just curious, your own upbringing in sport. Did you play much?
I grew up in a small village in South Africa, and I think there was about 80 kids from grade 1 to grade 7. So from something like grade 3, I played in the firsts, which sounds impressive.
As in rugby?
In rugby, cricket,
Yeah.
whatever. But it was just because we had to make up a team. And so you just get chucked in. So that was the upbringing. My father's now getting deeper into his 80s, and he still plays golf twice a week, tennis 3 times a week. My mother does park run and tennis and stuff. So we've just been an active family. One of those guys who probably, back in those days when you played a different sport every term compared to now where pretty much by a year, whatever, you focused on one. And I just loved each term. So to answer your question, I played a lot of sports, but I'm not a failed athlete. I was actually from a very young age really interested in the sports science stuff. I used to read Sports Illustrated and be way more excited reading the coach's article or the interview with the coach than with the player.
Yep.
And so when I was in high school and I heard about this degree that you could work in sports in South Africa, well, it's exercise, what's now exercise physiology. When I heard about that, I just knew that was for me.
Cool.
And so, to answer your question, played a lot of sport, never really had dreams of becoming a professional athlete, always had dreams of working in sport and with athletes and helping them.
Really interesting, because that was the case for me too. Like, I don't know if that was a lack of belief or what, but I always looked at sport from how the people were connecting and the relationships, and that's what I do now. But I've been similar to what you described. I've kind of been being the observer in that space all that time, and to me that go on.
Oh, I was just going to say, I remember one time so I grew up near Durban in South Africa, and the rugby team is the Sharks, and I just couldn't wait to meet the coach. Like, I was kind of, players move away, I want to meet the coach, and I would have been probably 11 or 12 at that age. And it was, I don't know why, but that's where the highlight was. So obviously there's a similar thread there.
That's really cool. Yeah, I was similar to you. I'd be reading those articles, really fascinated by the people and the human behavior and how they operated and why and all those sorts of things. So it's interesting that when you do a bit of digging and you find yourself in the right place, that you realize that it's probably been there the whole time. That's really cool. So if you look at that from a sense of purpose, what does helping people to be their best, like what sense of purpose does that give you?
It's an interesting one. I'm not 100% sure. It's just been something that I've done my entire life. I think it's just who I have been from a young age, just volunteering or helping people in different channels. But especially being attracted to the performance side. So I'd say probably, back in those school days and early university days, the goal was to work at I can say what the stated goal was: to take an athlete to the pinnacle of their sport. So track and field, Olympics. When I was working in rugby union, it was always to go to the Rugby World Cup,
Yep.
and as it turned out, I started working with tennis, and Australian female tennis player said, "Hey, can you prepare me for Wimbledon?" And that's, in my mind, that was tennis. There are 4 Grand Slams, of course, and whatever. But I think if you had to ask most tennis players, Wimbledon would be the one that most wanted to win, or most wanted to succeed in. So once I did that, then it kind of scratched my itch, and then I changed focus to coach people more for health.
How did that opportunity come about? Like, was that just one of those sort of things where everything just fell into place?
To go to Wimbledon? No. If you look through my career, there was very few things that just fell into place. There was a lot of hard work.
Yeah.
Like, just a bit of backstory. So you probably heard this, and this probably applies to many domains. But sport, especially high performance sport, they say it's not what you know, it's not who you know, it's who knows you. And from my side, moving in 2003 to Australia, immigrating to Australia, I started on the back foot because no one knew me from anything. Typically, you might, in exercise physiology, or if you're doing a course, you go do some prac hours with someone, and that's your first in to make a connection and build your network. And I didn't have any of that. And then stupidly, I got recognition for, I say stupidly with hindsight, I got recognition for prior learning for a lot of my courses, which meant I was inadvertently limiting the amount of people that I could network with or connect with, because I wasn't doing the course, I wasn't meeting the lecturer, I wasn't meeting the other students and so forth. So my career was just outwork everyone. That's what I did. I think I worked out that somewhere around 2005 to about 2010, I was averaging about 70 hours a week of just work, where anyone, if it was club rugby, I'd be there. If it was junior sport, I'd be there. If it was a school, something, I'd be there. Training people, coaching people. I remember taking on a gig on Sundays, which when you take on a gig on Sundays, it means there's no socializing on Saturday night. Anyway, so eventually I landed up working with Tennis Australia, headed up the National Academy. And I think the athletes just knew that I was there for them. And, with that same mindset of just being, I wasn't thinking I'm going to outwork them, anyone else. At that stage, I was thinking I'm just going to give my athletes everything. And then one of the women, Jamila Gardasova, she was Slovakian born. She represented Australia since she was 14. Actually not since she was 14. She'd been on the professional circuit since she was 14. She represented Australia in the Fed Cup. And we connected at the Brisbane International Tennis Tournament. And she saw my work. At that stage, I was working with a young Ash Barty. And so she saw my work there and said, "Hey, can you prepare me for Wimbledon?" So I was like, so I actually had to take leave from my official job to go prepare her for Wimbledon. But I loved it. It was good, and that was that set in place the next stage of my career, which is sort of more the health and stay away from that high performance space.
Was there something that brought about that transition? Like, if you loved that experience in Wimbledon, like, was there something that triggered that change?
It had been growing a little bit, but so I'm sitting. There was an exact moment where I can pinpoint, even though there was been some not, I wouldn't say resentment, but there was something that wasn't scratching the itch in terms of the high performance stuff. So I'm sitting across from Jamila. We're preparing for Wimbledon, arguably the pinnacle of tennis, right? We're having dinner, and she would have been, she was probably 24 in the world at the time. and we're having dinner, and I'm telling her, no, you can't eat that. Like, or no, you got to eat more of this.
Yeah.
And this is a woman who had been coached by some of the great, like really good coaches, guys who had also coached Grand Slam winners.
Yep.
She had been through a Tennis Australia program. She had been through the AIS. She had access to dietitians. She had access to sports psychologists and strength and conditioning coaches. And I'm thinking, why am I telling you what to do now? Like, this should all be refined. And after that dinner, I started thinking, for me to help people, and that's been that urge, is I've got to get in younger. Like, what I'm doing now is really just the icing on the top. It's good for the ego. It's fun. You're at Wimbledon, press conferences. We got invited to sponsors dinners. We were, at that stage, I think she was with Lacoste. So, we got invited to all these fancy things, but that wasn't why I was doing it, I was doing it to help people. And I was like, I've got to work younger, and I've got to get in earlier to set them up and build those foundations. This is too late. And so coming back from Wimbledon, I gave notice to Tennis Australia. And I think I left after the Australian Open, so about February 2013, with a very explicit mindset of trying to help people at a younger age and prepare them for that. So those kind of things, which should have happened earlier, were happening earlier.
Love it. Yeah, that's something I've realized myself and working more with young athletes, but also their parents, which is an important part, which we'll come back to. This is a bit of a unrelated link, but also is related. I noticed you also worked at Brisbane Boys College. Yes. Around high performance. Do you reckon there might have been a seed planted there about the impact you can have at that age, given that you've worked with people of all ages?
Yeah. So a very normal trajectory in strength and conditioning, athletic development, whatever you want to call it, is you kind of work your way through the ranks. So you start with the younger athletes. So I think I'm correct in saying I was the first full-time strength and conditioning coach in a school environment. This was back in 2005. I think at least in Brisbane, in that GPS sort of elite boys boarding school type private school setting. Yeah. And so I was working with them, and if I'm honest, I probably didn't appreciate it as much as I should have at the time. I'll explain what I meant. Earlier on, you asked a question. I said I was just so hungry. I was putting in all these hours. And I saw BBC, Brisbane Boys College, as a stepping stone to something greater. And my eyes, I think I'd been there only a few months, and someone from the Australian Rugby Union, now Rugby Australia, said, hey, there's a position going, you should put in for it. And I did. I didn't end up getting that position, which I'm grateful for. But my 5 years at BBC, I learned so much. And yes, there I could actually see the difference I could make. And there were some things happening. But, the whole time while I was working with these boys and I was giving them everything, I was also had one eye on what the next opportunity was. And to be fair, the first couple of years of that, part of it was because I needed to get I was still on I wasn't on a permanent residence visa. So I needed a job that could help me with get permanent residency. But another part was just this ego of being seen to be work with high performance athletes.
Yeah.
And I can tell you now, like one of my favorite coaching memories is I took a team. I was working with the first 15 rugby at BBC. And in under 14, they hadn't won a game. 15, they hadn't won a game. Under 16, they hadn't won a game. And now they're in the Opens. And that year that I worked with them, we won 3 games, 3 out of 8 games, which on my resume, objectively, it's a failure. You didn't even win half your games. But the pride of these boys, who were the only team to beat the end of year premiers.
Wow.
We're also the only team to lose to the Wooden Spooners. But we won 3. These boys won 3 matches. the parents were ecstatic. The boys, that they puffed up chest, like, and the cool thing was they were competitive. They'd gone from being, 40 plus losses and so forth, to being competitive, to be in the mix, to be mid-table. That was like, and all these things were happening, and I probably didn't appreciate them as much as I should have. But now that's one of my proudest coaching moments. And not long ago, maybe 2 years ago or so, I bumped into a boy who was in that team, and his eyes lit up, and he was so pumped, and he's a dad now, and there's a whole bunch of things. But it was important to him. So on the one hand, on my resume, and what people might be interested in is Wimbledon or something like that. And on the other hand, like, that's where I've made a real difference. And so, but as I was saying, so you work your way up, and BBC was just an absolute foundation for my career, because I worked with rugby and rowing and tennis and football and volleyball and basketball. And I just had so much experience crammed into that time, because you're coaching the whole time. There was off season for rugby, meant preseason for rowing. Basketball went all year round. Volleyball pretty much went all year round. So you're working with these sports the entire time, and balancing, and then budgets and a whole bunch of things. So that was really important for my career. And I just probably didn't recognize it at the time, how important it was. And for me as a person.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, and I can totally relate to that. And I'm sure plenty of other people can, is losing sight of what is going to be most fulfilling, and instead of getting caught up in the ego of what's going to look the best on your resume. So good. Did you learn something through that process about young people that you were then able to take forward and utilize, you the dad, just in other areas of your life? Because it's, no matter what role you're playing there, you have the opportunity to have a positive impact on those children that they'll take with them their whole life. And as you said, they feel that strongly about it that you get the reaction you got from that young fella that you ran into later.
Yeah, I did. And what was really cool, and this was partly being at BBC, but also partly I think could have happened anyway, is when I was there, I had this budget. So you got to understand, I was coming from South Africa. It was super expensive for me to buy textbooks and things from South Africa, because you're paying for US dollars. I think the exchange rate back then, rand to US dollar, was about 10 to 1. I've got no idea what it is now. I come to Australia, it's now like sort of 2.5, 3, or whatever it was back in the day. Then, but I could now suddenly afford to buy textbooks and things. And then at BBC, they gave me a budget of professional development. So I would just order these books and then just absolutely consume them. And so parallel to this is, Ian, I've never been a dictatorial, yelling type of coach. I've always sort of been in the trenches with the person, or maybe a softer kind of coach. In fact, I think this is counted against me. There's been many interviews where people, how are you going to punish and how are you going to discipline the athletes? And I'm thinking, well, if I need to punish and discipline them, I probably haven't set up my environment correctly. That's, but the interviewer at the rugby league club wants to hear that you carry a big stick, or whatever the case is. But while I was at BBC, and I don't think I would have bought this book if it had been my own money. I bought some book. I wish I could remember the name of it. And it was about a gridiron coach at school, at a US high school. And the theme of the book was that he loved his athletes. And it talked about how successful he was, and things that you and I have just talked about now, like things that are sort of more important than the win and loss column. And I found something that said, hey, I might not be on the wrong path, because I'm not this disciplinarian, dictatorial type of coach, but I'm actually someone that can talk to people about their parents getting divorced, or they're breaking up with a girlfriend, or the pressures of exams, or whatever it is. I can sort of be alongside them. And so reading that book, but being in that environment where you've got these impressionable young guys who are, trying to be a little bit macho and stuff, and I could rein them in and say, no, mate, we don't treat girls like this, or we don't talk like this, or that's not the way we behave here. High performance is about having respect for this, or whatever the case was. But that book, I wouldn't say gave me permission, but it just gave me confidence. And then the cool thing is that I could, while reading that book, the very next day, I'm in a situation where I can apply that knowledge. So if I hadn't been at BBC, it might have been a little bit more theoretical, and whereas this was just read and apply, read and apply, read and apply. And so that was a huge part of it. And then off the back of that, I could also see that there were coaches who could trust in my way of doing it. I could work in a macho, or whatever you want to call it, type of sport, rugby union, and I didn't have to carry a big stick. In fact, sometimes a little whisper of, mate, you're letting yourself down, or I'm really impressed with your hard work, can have a way better effect than any kind of punishment or discipline or whatever it was. And so that all sort of, what do you want to call it? That all congregated at BBC. The book, having the budget to buy a book that I probably wouldn't have bought anyway, but I bought it, I read it, I could apply it, and then I could, within a very short time, I could iterate and see the improvements that way of coaching really had an effect on.
Yeah, and it's what the rest of the world's catching up on now, is realizing that you got to be people first.
100%.
There's so many great stories. The one that springs to mind is a guy that I met when I was still in corporate, who was doing people development. He was working with a club here in Sydney, and one of the players had a huge dip in form, and chatted to him, find out what was going on. It turned out his mum was really sick. He hadn't told anyone, and he basically talked him through that. And that person then went on to have an incredible finish to the year, including winning the man of the match in the grand finals. Like, just because he'd taken the time to talk to him and find out what was going on. But the old method would have just been, you need to work harder, you need to pick yourself up, and it just doesn't work. It's like in these professional environments, them putting in more detailed and stronger rules as a way of trying to bring them into line. It just doesn't work because they keep stuffing up. It's actually, how do we create connection and scenarios like you talked about, where you can say the right thing at the right time in the right way to actually create real change. That's really powerful, mate. I love that.
100%. Thank you.
So you said you kind of jumped from when, you're growing up in South Africa to you always had a fascination. Did you also have a fascination of helping people? Like, if you were in an environment where you're playing in the first 11 at a really young age, where I don't know, did you have someone sort of there that was sort of took you under your wing, or were you left a little bit alone? Like, where do you think the passion and desire to be that sort of person of service it just seems to come out so naturally in you?
I guess if I look back, my father was always very community driven. He just helped the community in so many ways. We grew up on the beach, and there was a lagoon there. It was idyllic. It really was. And he was the commodore of the boating club. He was on. We didn't have a city council or anything. We had a health committee. He was on the health committee. He was on the school board. He was the official starter at the swimming carnivals and the athletics carnivals. He just contributed, and my mother did much the same. So there was always a drive, or just an expectation to be involved and help the community in some way. And I suppose from my parents to me, I just kind of channeled that into that sports coaching role, which, and so I think it went from there. But I suppose the roots were always there from my parents, who were just really big in a very small, really helpful in a really small community, and that it probably at least was seeded there.
Yeah, really cool. And that's generally where it happens, right? From parents, and sometimes I think, when our parents are people that are volunteering and giving a lot of their time, we probably, I don't know, personally, you can feel a little bit like you're not getting enough of what they're given in so many other areas. So you end up repeating the same pattern. I don't know if that's something you can relate to. Do you now find yourself as the parent being that community engaged person and being the coach or the manager in the sport and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, my wife just rolls her eyes and goes, "Oh, always the coach." So like, we can be at a creek. We do a lot of outdoor activities. Our kids swim at I live in a really small village again. I suppose we've been drawn out. We live outside of Brisbane, and it's a small community. And I'm involved with a whole bunch of different sporting activities. But even when the kids have friends over, I seem to somehow it ends up being a coaching session. And I don't mean that like that. But it's just there. It's just who I am, I guess. There's nothing I can do about that.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, I get it.
And to be fair, my wife knew me like 8 years before we got married. So it's her fault. She knew what she was signing up for.
Exactly. Spot on. So, Grant, how do you go from growing up in a small place in South Africa coming to Australia? What was the catalyst?
Ooh, yeah. Okay. So at the end of my high school, I was a Rotary exchange student. So I left South Africa. I was 17 years old, went overseas for a year. I landed up in New York for 1 year, which was eye-opening. And it was quite interesting because all my friends, or I should really say all my friends' parents, were really worried about me going to New York because they were worried about the dangers there. In fact, one friend, we went out pistol shooting to work on my aim because I thought I need to prepare myself for New York. And then I get to New York and everyone says how bad it was in South Africa with all the violence that we had. So I was there for a year, and South Africa was pretty much all I knew, or at least third world was all I knew. I've been to countries, Swaziland, Lesotho. I traveled around Southern Africa, Zimbabwe, Botswana. We'd been to Mauritius. So third world was all I knew. And so then now I land up in America, specifically New York. And it's like, whoa, okay. Yeah. This is also here in the world. I go back to South Africa after a year, go to uni. 2 years later, my sister goes on exchange. She lands up in Boston. So we both been in the northeast of the US.
Yep.
And we're having a chat. And it's like, okay, there's a whole world out there. Are we going to stay in this third world country that, now that we know what's out there?
Yeah.
And we've both got 3 younger siblings. So there's 5 kids in our family. And so we went to my folks and said, hey, guys, just a quick heads up. Like, we don't know if we're going to be here for the rest of our lives. And my folks were thinking with 5 kids, they didn't want, and, at this stage, people are starting to immigrate to leave South Africa. So they didn't want one in London, one in New Zealand, one in Canada, one in the US, and one in Australia. So they said, okay, as a family, we're going to move. We had a look at a few places. Probably looking climate-wise, New Zealand was out, Canada was out. No one wants to live in the UK. US is pretty harsh. So we just, we said Australia. And then within Australia, we didn't want to be in Perth because we knew of some people and, it's such an easy flight from Perth to South Africa. And we said, no, wherever we move, we're going to assimilate. We're going to be in that country. Yeah. The plan was, for me to support the Wallabies, and I haven't been able to do it in 20 whatever years.
Whose plan was that?
I thought I'd step off the plane, I'd be a Reds and a Wallaby supporter, and I did that. Just hasn't eventuated. Yeah, exactly. Anyway, so we put the plans in place. There was no real urge. This is the funny thing, Ian.
Yeah.
When I grew up, in my classroom, remember I said it was a small village. It was about just over an hour outside of Durban. We had 3D posters in our classrooms. This is as a young kid, so that we could identify what landmines look like. If we went into a shopping center, it would be metal detectors. Mom's handbag would be, like check for metal or weapons or whatever. So that's what we grew up in. That was totally normal for us. Anyway, we start putting the wheels in motion to move, and I'll say my folks were doing this. I was probably more just interested in uni and my sister uni and whatever. And then some bad stuff started happening. By the time I was 30, I had 10 friends dead from a variety of things. It was just really like just wrong place, wrong time.
What?
And
10 friends?
yeah. And so I'm glad we got out. And that's no disrespect. I've still got friends in South Africa. Not many. A lot of them have left. But so from our side, just the safety of the family was just key. Because the violence was so random and also so horrific. There's a deep resentment and anger in a lot of that violence. And so, once we started experiencing what it is to live in a first world country, it does make it harder to go back. There's some plus sides. Like, don't get me wrong, there's some real plus sides where, laws are sort of more, suggestions. You can negotiate your way out of everything, and which we found in Australia you couldn't do.
Yeah.
Traffic lights are more like, hey, if you want to stop this, but so that was a big driver to come in, just the family safety. And so at the time I was working with a team, the Natal Sharks. It's a rugby union team. So I finished my contract, but my parents and my younger siblings came out to Australia about 6 months before I did. I finished my contract and then came over. But from my side, and this is just a personal sort of selfish thing, it was bad timing because I hadn't done enough to kind of have built a resume. But I also, as I said in the beginning of this, is I hadn't done my work. I couldn't do my work experience or anything like that. So I was kind of caught between no one cared really what I'd done because I'd only done it for a year, but also I wasn't doing any courses or, I probably should have signed up for a master's or something like that to extend that network.
So you came out here when you were 18, did you say? 17, 18?
No. I went to the US when I was 17. I think I turned 25 in my first year.
Let's just be brutally honest here. There is no way at 25 you're going to come here and follow a team that's been the enemy for 25. Look, I'm just thinking in my own head, like I can't comprehend the third world part, and I can understand wanting to have a fresh start, but I can't comprehend the changing teams. Like never going to happen.
But in my mind, what I was thinking, I can tell you what I think is because I held Australia in such high regard. So this is 2003, but obviously
back when we could play rugby.
Yeah. So you 2003 Australia made in 99 you guys won the World Cup. Then in 2001 you had the British Lions, a very successful tour there, or for the Wallabies. The Reds weren't doing so well then, but they'd had some really good years, and they had the Horns and the Tugger Carefoots and all those guys come through. But where I was going with this is that was the mindset, just to embrace Australia. We wanted to live here, as Australians. We weren't. It wasn't a look-see. It wasn't a vacation, extended vacation or anything. It was like, set our roots there. Yeah, all in. Yeah.
That's cool. No, I'm just like me, the sports fan, because I can't comprehend people that change teams. Like you think about it, and even my brother was saying, he's moved to Melbourne and he's thinking, maybe I'll follow the victory in the football, but he said just can't change.
Yeah. Tough one.
So sorry, we jumped back in time there a minute, which was well worth it because that's a great story. And I want to get to what you're doing now, but I'm also curious. Like, there must have been some real key differences culturally, but I'd love to explain that through how you learned that through the different career options that you took. Like, what were the sort of key differences that you learned that were helpful? What were some other things that maybe you brought from South Africa that you were thinking, why aren't they doing that here? Was there any sort of culture shock from that sense?
Massive, and not pointing the finger at anyone, but I think our family went Southern Hemisphere. Brisbane/Gold Coast is very similar climate to Durban. Rugby and cricket, and the massive difference was not because of the difference per se, but our perception of it being so similar.
Yeah, right.
So we thought there would almost be no change. Naively and stupidly, we just went Southern Hemisphere, same climate, cricket, rugby union. I don't think it went much deeper than that. And to be fair, there's so many other things to consider, like where you're going to live and exchange rate and where to sell business. My dad had sells business and the house and investments and transfers and all this kind of stuff. So it wasn't I think we might have explored it deeper if we'd moved to a New Zealand, a Canada, UK, or US, but we just, and then coming here, it was like, whoa, like just a simple thing, which is so dumb, but I couldn't believe how insignificant rugby union was. For us as South Africans and the Wallabies, Australia was huge in rugby. And you get here and you have to go back 3 pages in the sports section to find a small article about what the Reds did. That was just amazing to us. In South Africa, almost every high school is going to be playing rugby union. And you get here, and there's in the whole of Brisbane, there's like 9 GPS schools and then a few AIC schools that play rugby union. So there was those kind of differences. And then Ian, there was one other thing that kind of caught me off guard, and I couldn't believe how well prepared my university, so my undergrad and my honors year, and then my internship year, had prepared me for what I was doing. And I felt that in sports specifically, Australia had some unbelievable practitioners in the athletic development, strength and conditioning world, and then obviously on the physiotherapeutic world. But there was a truckload who were living off the coattails of those successful people, and they just weren't as up to it. And there was this kind of cultural thing where I was like, wow, I'm actually quite well prepared for this, but the person I'm interacting with is less prepared than I am.
Yeah.
But they are from Australia, first world country, just had a successful 2000 Olympics, plus all the other successes that happened at the turn of the century. And then, so there was this kind of, I think I developed quite a chip on my shoulder, and it probably came out in a number of interactions with, what do you call it? Like higher level coaches, physios, and all that kind of stuff. And it was a frustration of mine because I felt like I'd done a lot of work and been well prepared academically and through degrees and whatever, degree and postgrad. But I was getting shut down by someone who didn't have my knowledge. And that in the early days, I think I would have come across quite combative and frustrated, which would have been my desire to increase, but then also my frustration with the person in front of me who I didn't think was as good as they thought they were.
That is fascinating, because I think if you ask most Australians, they would have had an experience like that in the corporate world as well. Like, I'm just thinking, is that really a cultural thing in Australia that is a difference? Because you often, and actually in sport too, like it's always people talking about who you know and other people getting opportunities and something to dig deeper into, I think, because that seems all too familiar. But I could completely understand that, particularly when you're not having any sort of reputation or anything carry over with you, that must have felt, that must have been endlessly frustrating.
Yeah, it was. And then, that's where it was just kind of like, hey, I'm just going to commit to outworking anyone. And reputation and degrees and theoretical knowledge, how hard you work is kind of a level playing field. Like there's no status behind it or anything like that. It's just like, hey, we're all on the same page. And if I'm first in and last out, I'm going to outwork you. And you might have better connections, better network, better qualification, better university name or whatever it is. I can't compete with this, but there's one thing I can compete with.
Now, I work with a lot of people who've either experienced burnout or end up in that place when we're working together, and it's often from that pattern of like, that pattern of I'm going to outwork people and putting in the hard yards, and there's a whole raft of reasons why there are patterns in a lot of different people. But have you found that sort of you've been able to get on top of that, or can that still be a challenge at times where you're going longer than you need to?
No, it definitely. I think it's definitely a challenge. And there was a part. I remember calling my dad one day and just saying, I think I've got nothing left. Like it was around that 2010, the back end of when I'd sat down and worked out how many hours I was sort of averaging a week. And I just remember talking to him about that. But here's the thing, Ian, is if you want to achieve anything in life, there's going to be a whole lot of hard work. And it's not for everyone. But at some point, you're going to have to push yourself to some kind of limit. And I understand. I'm seeing this more and more. I take on a lot of young coaches from a mentor point of view, from an internship point of view, from a work placement kind of thing. And I chat to them. And there's been this massive switch from that hunger that I had and a lot of guys my age had. And now, people in there are 21 and talking about life balance. And that's good. Good on them. But I think if you're going to fast forward, your 20s, especially as a man, you need to produce something. You need to work for something. And if you don't, you might have this awesome life balance. But I do worry that we're going to have a whole bunch of men in a few years' time who are going to get to their 30s and they've got not like right now, and we can chat about this with the supplement company that we started in May 2023. It's been going for about 18 months. I've had to dig into these 60-hour weeks now. It's not the 70 that I was doing when I was single and free and just had a unit to just walk back and close. Like I go home now and there's kids who want my time. And, as we talked about, I'm helping with the swimming club and the soccer club and doing all that kind of stuff. And if I didn't have that strength that I'm built to draw on of going, hey, I've done this before, I can do it again. And that ability to just kind of just get it done, despite whatever obstacles are in your way. I'm not sure if I think I would have quit. I think I honestly would have quit.
Sorry. I was just going to say, I think you nailed it. Like if you want to be successful at the thing that you're doing, then you've got to put in the hard work. That's just a given. I would add there that you want to make sure it's something you love, because if you don't, then all you're going to end up with is with resentment. So now I left corporate to have a business that was more flexible with time and my ability to, move up the ladder, or, however you want to look at it. Ultimately, though, I found myself working more because I loved it. I realized that actually in a corporate world where it was roles that I didn't love, I was probably cruising. So I think that's the important part, right? So let's get to the supplements. Where did that, you talked about when you were working in tennis and how you realized that actually I need to get into people when they're younger and focus on their health. But that desire, did that come from your own health challenges, seeing other people's health challenges, or did you just see a gap in what was needed and you had a passion for helping at that age?
I just so I've been health conscious my whole life. As a young kid, I had this swimming coach. This is back in that little village I was telling you about. And one day I would have been 7 or 8 years old, and she just said to me, "You drink cordial, it's bad for you." So I just stopped drinking cordial. Like it was no issue for me. I'd never thought about it. I used to, back then I thought Wheat Bix and All Bran were healthy. So I used to eat that because I never touched Cocoa Pops or Strawberry Pops or whatever those other ones are called. I don't think Wheat Bix and All Bran are healthy now, but at the time I've just always been health conscious. And then you actually touched on this earlier when we were chatting so I'm at high performance. I'm working out that I need to go back to the kids to set up good foundations. But as you mentioned, you got to hit the parents, because they, if a 12-year-old kid, it's hard to make them responsible for the food, their nutrition. It's what mom and dad put in the fridge and in the pantry. So part of my evolution, this is back in about 2015, 16, somewhere around there. I was like, hey, wait a second, I can tell these kids everything I want about nutrition, but mom and dad are buying it. So the focus changed a little bit then. to try educate parents. And that's when I started the gym. Back then it was called Propel Perform. It was mainly athlete focused. It was an awesome, it was an awesome atmosphere. You come in there, there'd be people training for world champs for triathlon, mountain biking, BMX. There'd be tennis players who'd just flown in from the circuit. And then there was a bunch of younger athletes coming through. So the atmosphere was electric. We had, we had squash players who just unbelievable fitness, competing with the power of the BMXs, it was just really
good. Yeah.
Anyway, so I started to open it up more to get parents. So, and it obviously started with the young kids who were training with me, get their parents coming in. And I just saw that, moms and dads need the help. Like, there's still people who think, I don't know, eggs are bad for you, and this is not too, whatever, and so it just kind of built from there. Like, no, that's wrong. In fact, I'm right now, I'm sitting in my office in where I do initial consultations, and I have to tell parents, before you tell me what your nutrition's like, just be aware that there are going to be some things that you think are really bad, and I'm going to say, no, you can eat that as much as you want. And the other things that you're going to proudly tell me that you eat whatever, and I'm going to say, you're never putting that in your mouth again.
Yeah.
So there's so much misinformation. There's so much stuff there that's damaging to health. And if we don't get the parents right, how are we going to get the kids? And if we don't get the kids right, how are we going to get the high performance athletes?
Yeah.
So anyway, the supplement side of it has been a sort of an ebb and flow. When I was young, in my 20s, I was taking quite a few supplements because, hey, if I can get quicker gains or whatever the case is, I'll try that. And I've always had a philosophy of at least trying it on myself before I can prescribe it. And then I went through a phase of, no, I've got to get all my nutrients from my food, natural food, go as organic as possible.
Yep.
But the more I dug into that, the more I realized how much the food chain lets us down. Foods that are picked in avocados that are picked in Brazil and then take weeks and weeks to get across here. And, no farmer is incentivized to give you and I more micronutrients. They are incentivized to make the fruit or veggies juicier and bigger and sweeter. So that's what they select for. And that's not a crack at the farmers. I'm just saying that those are the market forces.
Yeah.
No restaurant is incentivized to give us the maximum amount of protein. In fact, protein of the three macronutrients has got the lowest profit margin. So if you and I go out for a steak, they're going to give us the smallest steak they possibly can get away with for the price. Yep. They're going to fill us up on bread, chips, and and they might even say, hey, you want salad or veggies? That's where the profit margin is.
Yeah.
So understanding that, I was like, okay, wait a second, I might have to reintroduce some of these supplements into it. But what really accelerated this was my wife and I found out about a company that went into receivership, and we knew some of the staff, and they were desperate because they were losing their job. One lady had been working at this company for 15 years, and she's kind of been told, hey, from Friday, there's no job here. You're not going to get paid.
Yeah, wow.
And so it was this really cool mix of an experienced team who are making supplements, who were looking for a job, and my wife and I who have been interested in looking at building supplements. Now, it was probably quicker and earlier than we anticipated, but when we said, hey, let's get this team together and let's keep going. So we got the team together. All these things take a little bit more time than you'd like it to be. We found a facility. We started producing. We picked up a national distributor quite early on. We started an e-commerce brand. We started making some connections. We got the supplements up and running again. And then since January, every month we've released 1, 2, or sometimes 3 new products. So we've got R&D happening. And we've got this awesome team. We've got a food technologist who keeps us in check to make sure that, from a regulations point of view with the TGA and FSANS and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And we're like sort of really making a dent in the supplement universe.
Fantastic. Before we jumped on and hit record, I was telling you like my story about really pursuing my physical health in so many different ways. The catalyst being my dad's passing and being determined that I was going to live a longer and healthier life. The things that I've learned around health that just aren't widely known and aren't widely shared or suppressed. That's a whole other story. But it's amazing some of those old, what they would call old wives' tales, or those solutions from 50, 60 years ago, they have so much merit. And the first thing when I jumped onto your website to have a look that I noticed that really caught my eye was the castor oil.
Yeah.
And what I've been learning in the last 12 months around the huge benefits of castor oil that our grandparents knew.
Yes.
And they used, and some of I've seen some funkier things how it's used, but like hair loss, like so many different layers. So are you also at the same time as going with what you know, are you looking for new supplements all the time and learning about this as you go as well?
100%. Steepest learning curve of my career.
Yeah.
This is, okay. Before we continue, can you block my wife from listening to this? Because she's going to say, I told you so. I'll give you some context to that. So when we met, I used to think, what is this chick? Like, she would tell me some stuff. And so, okay, got my undergrad, got my honors. In my honors, it was drummed into us. Peer-reviewed studies, that's what it's got to be at. That's where everything, if it's not peer-reviewed, and double-blind studies and all this kind of stuff. And my wife, unbelievable massage therapist, kinesiologist. She would talk about energies and all this kind of stuff, and I just roll my eyes. I'm like, what are you talking about?
I think I need to interview her because she sounds amazing.
So yeah, she's not allowed to hear any of this. And so over time, because we still have things where I will say something and she'll be like, I was talking about this in 2010. I thought we had an argument about this. But yeah, Ian, so one of the aspects of this is this previous company that went into receivership had these sort of, I don't know what you want to call it, ancient remedies, old remedies. So, and yep, at first I rolled my eyes. I was like, oh, okay, cool. We'll make this, or we'll do this. So my alarm goes off at 4:30 in the morning. I'm normally awake by about 4:20. I get out of bed. I'm a pretty early riser. I grew up surfing, so I think that's always just been in me. Just get up.
Yeah.
The first hour of the day, one of the things that I prioritize is I do go through studies and I do read research. PubMed, I start with PubMed and kind of dig deeper from there. And there is actually evidence for this, number one. So in fairly decent journal articles and stuff. But here's the other thing is I now have, I don't know what the number is now. I have got so many emails from customers who, tried everything, went to the dermatologist, spoke with the pharmacist, referred by the GP, and somehow landed up on our website, kind of wild stab in the dark, and then they try something. From an example being the castor oil. I mean, my folks now, as I said, they both play tennis. They're quite active in the local tennis club. We get these orders, and it'll be Gold Coast, whatever. You can kind of see the region, and it'll be it's from them. And the reports that they're giving to me about people in their 50s, 60s, 70s who are trying to play tennis and rubbing castor oil on their joints. It's just amazing. It's amazing. I do think that if I went to the Brisbane Broncos or the Queensland Reds or the Brisbane Lions or whatever it was, the Raw, and I started proposing this, I think I'd just get laughed out of the room.
Yeah.
But the evidence is there from a N equals 1, the person in front of me who's buying this and is buying it every 3 months because it works. And then, but the evidence source there's a fair amount of it in the sort of regular mainstream, what do you want to call it, scientific knowledge.
Yes.
It's just the problem is, I suspect, and this is me putting my conspiracy theory hat on, the profit margins. So for a pharmacy, it's way better for them to sell some other kind of anti-inflammatory drug, which has knock-on effects with bone growth and skeletal this and joint that or whatever. But that's not a problem, because then they'll sell you the next drug, which will help with that thing, but cause on the downstream effects on that. And it just kind of continues. So once you get onto that conveyor belt, you're a lifelong, it's like a subscription model.
Yep. And sadly that is true. And some people might even turn off at this point, but that's okay, because like we're here to push the boundaries of people's beliefs. That's a lot of what I've learned. And also realizing that there's a whole lot of ways that we've been told to live that don't work in the long term, but there are a whole lot of other ways which are usually less well known, shall we say, almost hidden away, that works so much better. And it's not to say that it's like throw everything out and don't see the doctor and all that sort of thing, but it's well worth having an open mind to different alternatives. Because what you said there about taking these sorts of things as supplements and so on into a rugby league club, I think the same thing about some of the work that I do, very similar to kinesiology, which has scientific backing, but I imagine that there would be an element of skepticism, shall we say, and yet we could be stopping them from repeating injuries. We could be stopping them from having those same patterns of a whole lot of different things. So I'd love for you to share. I think you got something else to share with that first. So maybe you go and then I'll ask the question.
Oh, I was just going to say a really interesting thing happened. So we're pushing to get into New Zealand, and I've reached out to a few distributors out there, and we had a chat. And it's kind of like, hey, we've got some stuff, they're not, I wouldn't say anyone's busting at the door to have us there. This is a few months ago. And so one guy said, mate, look, okay, I can kind of see where you're going to go. They're more a sports supplement brand, and I'd position ourselves as more health/naturopathic. So he said, can you just send some samples? Anyway, I sent some samples, followed up a week or two later. Hey, mate, have you tried them, or what's happened? Nothing. Eventually, I get an email from him. He said, mate, we need to talk. So I call him up. What had happened, he got the samples. He gets samples from everyone. Everyone's trying to get in, big distributor or whatever. And his cousin had said, look, I'm having gut issues. I just don't know what. It's been for years. I've gone to the doctor. I've gone to this. They give me antibiotics. They give me this. Nothing really happened. And the guy, his name's Andrew. Andrew said, mate, I just said, look, take this. I'll send it to his cousin. His cousin called in 3 days and said, mate, where do you get that stuff? I need to order it. I need it long term. Like
what was it?
So we got a product called Gut Health Relief.
Yeah.
So and these are things that I'd never heard of 18 months ago, but it's got slippery elm bark, which is a very soothing on the gut. It's got yucca root, which is anti-inflammatory. It's got psyllium husk, which provides some kind of like a gentle fiber on the gut. And it's got inulin, which is from the Jewish artichoke. And it's just, within 3 days, he had sorted out his problem. So now I've got a distributor in New Zealand who can't get enough of our stuff. He's like, mate, send more. Please send the first order. Because he's seen it, he's effectively seen it firsthand. He's not selling from a fact sheet. He's not selling from a commission-based thing. He's selling because he's seen his own cousin improve in 3 days after knowing that he's had years and years of issues.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you to share a product that with a story, but you've just done that there straight off. So maybe could you share maybe something else also that people might not know about, another sort of supplement and the impact that it can have?
All right. Well, okay. So we already talked in 2005. I started with Brisbane Boys College.
Yep.
And at that stage, the school, it's a rugby school, rowing school, sports really important. And they said, hey, we know some of the boys are having supplements. Can you write a position statement on supplements so we've got something for the parents? To be honest, I think when they first were doing it, it was more to protect themselves than anything else.
Yep.
So Ian, back then I read something like 74 or 76 studies on creatine. But my focus was effectively union and league. So union, rugby union and rowing. Those were the two biggest sports at the school. So the angle was physical. But I'm reading all these articles and I start seeing stuff like, it helps with jet lag. It helps with sleep deprivation. It helps with traumatic brain injuries. So, but I'm not focused on this. I'm just looking at this, and I compile the supplement, what do you call it, position stand, and don't think of it. A few years later, I land up with tennis. So I'm working with these tennis players. We're traveling over multiple time zones, working in all these different countries. We go to, Europe, whatever, US. And I'm like, hey, wait a second, creatine, jet lag. It helps with that. Yeah. Okay, so we take it there. That's all good. A few years later, I'm now working with a lot of extreme sports. I started working with Skate Australia and BMX Queensland, and at our gym, we actually had better results with the gym, the athletes that trained to propel rather than those who worked with the high performance, the BMX Australia high performance unit. Anyway, traumatic brain injuries. I'm like, guys, you got to have this. But the interesting thing with creatine and traumatic brain injuries is it takes about 4 weeks for the uptake to kick in. Yep. So if you have a brain injury today and you start supplementing with creatine today, it's 4 weeks until it has an effect. So I'm thinking, well, we've got to take this before any injury happens. So all my BMXs, high risk of traumatic brain injuries, all my BMXs, 5 grams a day, we're just going to do that. So we do that. And so this has kind of just grown. Now I'm in a space where it's more, I'm working with moms and dads. So moms are hitting that perimenopausal phase. And now it's coming out with creatine and brain fog. You talk to any woman in that sort of menopausal, say, brain fog, struggling. One of my clients is a pilot for Virgin. She tells me she knows exactly when she's on creatine and when she's not on creatine because of the brain fog. And you don't want your international pilot suffering from brain fog, So that's a supplement. And if you look at social media now, you actually see there's a lot of this stuff happening with creatine. It's really caught up. Andrew Huberman's podcast with Stacey Sims, she talks about creatine, especially for women. This is something that I'm so glad it's caught on, because for 19 years, I've kind of been banging on and saying, hey guys, I've been taking creatine since so probably would have been 98. And back then I was such a poor student. The three of my 2 housemates and I, we used to, when you do this as siblings where you serve the creatine, and then whoever serves it, the other people get to choose which is the bigger one, to make sure that it's equal. That's what we're like, because we're so poor. And in South Africa, it was quite expensive. But anyway, it's super cheap. I've been taking it now for however many years it is, 26 years or whatever. Back then, I used to cycle 6 weeks on, 2 weeks off. Now I just take 5 grams a day, no loading phase. And it's something that I think everyone should be on. And I've pretty much got all my women and men who train with me, my moms and dads. And I'm just pumped that finally people have caught on to this research. And it's really, in fact, if you look at our packaging, we've specifically written the words underneath. So we have a theme, and the theme is cognitive function. So our packaging for creatine is, hey, you're taking this for the cognitive effects. There might be some physical benefits. We know about that, ATP regeneration, all that kind of stuff. But you are taking this for the cognitive benefits.
That's awesome. And my brain also goes to the conspiracy theory side of things, because it's also got a bad rap at different times because of the side effects. But the cynic in me says, well, who introduced those concepts of side effects, and what was the purpose of that? Because I just question everything. But I do have that genuine question. Are there any, you've done a heap of research, are there known side effects?
Okay. So some people report gut issues. But you got to, so when I was reading these studies, and I remember clearly thinking about this, almost every study it would mention the potential for the side effects. But I don't remember, and that's not to say there aren't any, I just don't remember reading a specific in the study, hey, we had 3 people who had this. It was kind of always in the introduction that it's possible that there could be, some form of diarrhea or some, but those were in the days where it was 5 grams a day, 5 grams 5 times a day as a loading phase. You did that for 5 days. I've never recommended it because I'm looking at creatine as much longer term. We don't need a loading phase. You don't need to super load your creatine muscle fibers. What you really need to do is just make sure that it's consistent.
Yeah.
So we don't even, when people say, oh, what about the timing of it? I'm less interested in the timing. So pre-exercise, post-exercise, within the window or the anabolic window or anything. I don't care about any of that stuff. I'm saying, Ian, when can you guarantee me? What's your routine, your daily routine, where you can guarantee me that you have it? Oh, Grant, I have a coffee in the morning, and while my coffee's heating up, okay, cool. Put it in a glass of water, swish it around, swallow it. You're probably going to have to put another bit of water in. So now you've drunk 2 glasses of water first up. That's a pretty healthy thing to do. You don't just do it where you can get the consistency. Way more important than trying to maximize the uptake. And back in those days, we had to take it with grape juice to get the insulin effect and all this kind of stuff. It's like, nah, don't worry about that. Don't stress about it. Just make sure you take it roughly the same time every day. Get your 5 grams, and you should be good.
Yeah, mate, so good. I'm going to have a longer conversation with you, I can tell. So I know you've got to go in a sec. So what's the vision now for the business? I love that you said your dad was in business. So there's obviously a bit of there's a repeating theme there. I don't know how many years and how many generations business goes back, but it's interesting that you've ended up working in business. What's the vision now for Propel going forward? And what other sort of things are you going to dive into?
That's an interesting one. So I don't think it's anything other at the moment. What it is really consolidating our space.
Yeah.
One interesting thing that's come on, and we've been working on this for a year now, is I just really want to. Again, gut health is connected to skin health. Okay, the biggest thing: eczema, psoriasis, everything, gut health. And you look right now, if you go to a dermatologist, they're going to give you a topical cream, probably some form of steroid. It'll work for the first 3 months. Then your body will accommodate it, so they'll have to up the dose, and you'll just be on this never-ending cycle of that. Gut health connected to chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, gut health connected to depression. 90% of serotonin is manufactured in your gut. It's so critical. And really what I want to do is nail this. Like we've got some of our best-selling products are our gut health range. And I really want to help people because it's something that is so achievable if you look in the right place. But what's going to happen is you're going to feel depressed, and you're going to go to a psychologist and maybe even a psychiatrist, and it's going to be meds. You're going to see skin issues, and you're going to go to a dermatologist, and it's going to be topical creams. You go to
Band-Aid instead of sustainable solutions.
Exactly. Band-Aid and superficial, and focus on the symptom, not on the cause.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that there won't be additional causes. So there could be something on your skin, or there could be, I'm not saying that, I'm saying that it's so frustrating that this is not done in tandem. You look at one of the greatest inventions, medical inventions, is antibiotics, no doubt about it. But antibiotics kills the bad bacteria. It also kills the good bacteria.
Yeah.
So, right now it should be, hey, Ian, your kids needs this antibiotic. But don't stress, we're going to give you a prebiotic and a probiotic with it so that we can kill the bad one and your kid can get better. But then we're not setting them up for a terrible cycle of whatever the case might be, because we've also killed the bad bacteria. We see, so this is really interesting. Maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, I had someone who got sick and then just said, mate, because so our Propel's probably nutrition paradigm is carnivore-ish, paleo-ish in terms of having, animal fats and animal proteins and stuff like that. And we can talk about that in another way. But anyway, that's the starting point. And I said, mate, for the last 3 or 4 weeks, I've just been craving sugars. But I knew that they'd been on antibiotics. I suspect that we are driven by our gut, and this particular dad taking the antibiotics, killed the bad bacteria, actually killed the bad bacteria for his sickness, but also killed some good bacteria. And whatever regrew in that space was demanding carbs. And it was interesting. We've got a product. It's called Gut Health Plus. So it's a symbiotic. It's a probiotic and a prebiotic mixed in. And he took that for, well, I would have seen him on the Saturday, and by the Tuesday already, he'll say, mate, sugar cravings, carb cravings are almost gone.
Yeah.
And so you wonder how often this is happening. This is just me in a very small gym in a small village north of Brisbane and talking face to face with these people. I wonder,
Yeah, it made me think of when I was having awful heartburn issues, and we had an iridologist come in to work who studies the eyes, and I was interested, but then they were rattling off a few different things. I'm like, oh, you could have guessed those, but then she identified a defect, a problem with my L5 in my spine, and I'm like, well, how could you have known that? So she helped me with diet and that sort of stuff. You mentioned Weet-Bix and All Brand, same thing, thought it was healthy. She goes, just try getting rid of that and see how you go. Because I'd been taking this Nexium, which was to stop the heartburn, and it was making me drowsy. And it took me a while to work out that it was actually making me, like I thought I had glandular fever again. That's how bad it was.
Yep.
So I just changed my diet and it was gone.
Yeah.
And I'm like, huh. So then again, that just opens your eyes up to every different possibility. And like you said, you've got to find, yes, it can be used in conjunction with medical stuff. We're not saying rule any of those things out, but you do have to treat the cause. Otherwise, it's just a Band-Aid. So I love how you describe that because it sums it up really well. The gut health is massive. I look at that traumatic head injuries piece. I've worked with a couple of people where we've cleared the emotional side of the traumatic brain injury, but I want to dig more into that. I do know you have to go, so I might have to get you back in for another crack, Grant.
Happy to do that. It's been a good chat.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. Some really fascinating things for some people to learn off, but also perhaps to stretch their belief and their comfort zone. So I thank you for that. And I'm very much looking forward to chatting with you again. Thank you. Thanks
very much for having me, Ian. It's been an absolute pleasure.
You're welcome, mate. Thanks again. To me, the best conversations are those when you get to be genuinely curious and learn a heap, like I did with that conversation with Grant. So the lesson for you to take and add to your game plan from this one is that when you're looking at your physical health, keep an open mind, be prepared to change old beliefs and do things differently when it comes to your physical health and your mental health. Now, we didn't get a chance to mention in the interview, but Grant has an offer for the listeners of this podcast to access some of those supplements that we talked about. So we'll leave his link in the show notes, and also there's a discount code there. So if you're curious and you want to start trying out some of these supplements, then jump onto his website, have a look. I'll see you on the next one. You've taken the time to listen to this whole episode. Now it's time to take action. Commit to one thing you've learned today and make it happen. And to avoid any obstructions, join the Sport is Life movement by clicking on the link in the show notes.